Welcome back. This is Ken Jordan, former agent of, well, let's just say, an organization. Several, actually, but you don't really need to know about that. Anyway, between the last set and this one, I've been thinking a little bit about what I would want to know if I were you and listening to this. Some guy comes on and says, hey, I'm the super secret agent in these things that you're not even allowed to know about. There's no way for you to check on it. Here are some stories to help you do something. Well, I can't prove that I'm even me. Honestly, if you were here, you couldn't prove that I was me either. There is no evidence. I've got ID. It means nothing. Ken Jordan is not my original name. Why would it be? Anyway, what we're looking at here is that there are several points that I can at least explain to you. And I've got a little story just to start things out, and I will keep this really short. I'm just going to paraphrase this one. When the conquistadors came to South America, and they were moving their ships into the coastline, the people were gathered by the shaman, who pointed out to them, look, it's Quetzalcoatl, coming to return, the prophecy is being fulfilled. And the people looked out, and they couldn't see anything. Even though there were several ships right there coming in. Until the shaman said, there, you see the brown things with the weird wings on the top, and then they could see it once it was described. Now, what I'm saying here isn't that these people were stupid. They weren't stupid. It was that they were being given information outside of their framework. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to point to things and say, hey, look, there, that funny looking thing. Only I'm doing it through stories. Now, these stories are going to be a little different for you because you have somebody who is presenting this as reality, saying, well, this is close enough for you to be paying attention to. There's extra information for you to possibly learn. Here are my thoughts about it. I'm doing that on purpose to try and ease some of you into seeing things that you might otherwise miss before it's too late. It's not 100%. Maybe you won't be able to do it. Maybe there won't be anything around for you to see for a while. Even if you just totally nail this. The more you study, though, the more you read things like this, the more you just play weird video games, watch weird movies, listen to weird music. The surrealism is your friend right now. The more you push your neural networks into adapting to new and unusual situations, the better off you're going to be when the time comes. We actually, in the agency, as new recruits, had to practice these things. Some of the practice was a lot more intense than what we can do here. Some of it involved some very, very strange things. The kind that would leave you with nightmares for a good long while. Not that I'm saying that I have nightmares about my training, but, yeah, there are some interesting things. So that's what this is all about, and it's why you should pay attention to this. Now, even if you hate my voice and you don't want to listen to me, that's fine. Start paying attention to the strange information, the weird information, the stuff that makes you feel uncomfortable now. When you look at it and just get that ooky feeling like you want to shut off, you want to shut down. When you're listening to it, it's like, this is annoying, this is too cerebral, this is too strange, they're talking about woo-woo, they're talking about fringe conspiracy theories, and I don't like it, something wants to turn off inside of me. Face that. Find that. Look at it. Find out why you feel that way and focus on it until that feeling goes away. By inoculating yourself against these things, against that feeling that you want to shut off, you're going to have an edge when the time comes. And that time is coming, and it is not far away. And I know I'm saying, push 2 to 7 years before the end. That doesn't mean you get 2 to 7 years before you have to deal with stuff. And even if it is 7 years before things shut down, that doesn't mean that you're going to be sitting easy for 7 years. You might find in 2 years you're fine, and by 5 years you're knee-deep in stuff. Well, if it's stuff that you can't really see, you're probably not going to do that well. Now, I picked out some more of these things, and I am skipping through them pretty quickly. There's a lot of other information, and don't ignore it just because I'm not pointing it out. I'm pointing out things that I can give you a little information on something similar to, where I can say, oh, I've heard of a thing kind of like this. I've witnessed something like this. I've had this happen to me. I can tell you my personal experience and hopefully draw you into it that way. That doesn't mean that's the only thing out there. Plus, some of these are kind of funny. I'm staying away from the funnier ones because I don't want to scare people off with goofiness, but being exposed to the funny and the goofy, that's just as valid as the scary and the strange. Keep that in mind. And read your comic book, boys and girls. Comic books, boys and girls, they're good for you. Okay. SCP-052 is a Type R4 New York City subway train. Official records indicate this train was built in 1932 and decommissioned for scrap in 1975. Nevertheless, it continues to appear on the Uptown AD track at the 59th Street and 8th Avenue station at 11:57 p.m. every Saturday. The train is in perfect condition and labeled as an A train. The subject appears at the designated time, opens its doors to accept discharged passengers for approximately 5 minutes, then closes its doors and disappears. It does not appear to ever contain passengers, except for those leaving the train during its appearance. The majority of subjects that have boarded SCP-052 have not been recovered. Passengers leaving the subject claim to have boarded on various dates from 1976 up to 2204. The latter claims are... Okay, this sentence is just written poorly. The latter claims are... Okay, the latter subject from 2204 claims he thought SCP-052 was a 300th anniversary special train. Subjects retain no knowledge of time on board. This happens constantly. Usually not in a 200 odd year time gap, but it does happen. Time, much like space, do not run in the smooth way that we are taught. Also, just because it could come up in your life, neither does gravity. Gravity fluctuates by up to 10%, sometimes 12%, depending on where you are and just time of day. This can happen really quickly. Most of the time, it is a very, very good measure. Where you are right now, gravity is probably running within a tiny percentage of what it's running at here. But it is not a consistent thing and does fluctuate in various measurements. Time does the same thing, particularly when we're dealing with space. Things in motion tend to have greater time distortions, and I'm not talking about consistent time distortions as with the Einstein theory of relativity and the speed of light problem, where the faster you go, the slower time passes for you compared to external time. I think I got that one right. I'm not just talking about that, but simply driving in a car. If you pay attention and you have synchronized atomic clocks, you will often find that just, say, traveling over the course of 100 or a few hundred miles, or on an airplane, that your clock will be very different by the time you compare it to the supposedly identical one on the ground. This is not spoken about. It is not something that you are generally allowed to know about. And it is not consistent, which is the biggest problem with it. So even if you have very reliable timepieces, time itself may well not run consistently. Now, the idea of a haunted train that travels through time, we certainly have ghost trains. We certainly, and by that I mean legends of ghost trains. I've never seen one. There certainly is this idea of a physical train that may be running on tracks that haven't been there for 100 years or something like that. So, basically the idea is not entirely lacking in plausibility. I do think that in 2204 we probably will not have a underground subway system there, but that's just me. For one thing, we probably won't be here then, but again, this is a story, and who knows, maybe we dodge the bullet somehow and something like that can happen. There's a lot more here. We get to learn a little bit about the passengers. Let's see. Generally, passengers from the past may be given Class A amnestics. Now, amnestic is their word, the SCP Foundation Protocol word for a memory wipe. It's a memory wiping drug. These exist. These are real. You even know the names of some of them. I'm not going to tell you about all of them, but I can think of 3 off the top of my head, and none of them are alcohol. We have the ability to do this, particularly in short-term memory. You can also do something similar by putting a 2-pronged taser of 50,000 volts up against the back of the brainstem of a person and giving them a jolt. This tends to wipe about 12 hours of memory off of a person. You might have to hit them 2 or 3 times. It does tend to work. You're also basically giving them electroshock to the brain. This is very dangerous and a horrible thing to do to people, but if it comes up, it's something that could possibly help you out in the future. So that was our time train. Again, kind of plausible. I certainly would not say if somebody climbed off a train and said they were from a different year like that, say that it could not happen. Okay, SCP-053, a young girl. And SCP-053 appears to be a small 3-year-old girl. She's capable of basic speech and appears to be slightly above average in mental development. She has a generally pleasant personality and rarely seems upset, becoming agitated only in the presence of groups of people. And who likes groups of people? If you're halfway sane, you probably have figured out that groups of people are where the bad things often happen. Any and all humans over the age of 3 who make eye contact with, physically touch, or remain around SCP-053 for longer than 10 minutes will rapidly become irrational, paranoid, and homicidal. Most, if not all, of these feelings will be directed at SCP-053, and afflicted subjects will attempt to kill the subject after first killing or driving off all humans visible to them. Those attempting to kill the subject will suffer massive heart attacks or seizures and die seconds after doing any physical damage to SCP-053. The subject will regenerate almost instantaneously from any wound, regardless of severity. Well, I'd love to tell you all that this is just not something that can happen, but honestly, I've seen at least 20 cases of very similar things. Usually it's a chemical, either imbalance or overproduction in the body which affects other people, and a whole host of things can be seen, including just people feeling really nice and friendly towards the individual instead of trying to kill them. Now, it does not usually go along with regeneration or rapid healing. If anything, the people who have such things going on tend to be a little bit sickly, so that's just something to keep in mind. The people dying of heart attacks and seizures, one of the effects of things like that can simply be that people who move into close contact with certain people just drop dead. Usually blood clots, heart attacks, or seizures. Again, this appears to be, more than anything else, a form of poisoning coming from the one person who is generally immune to it. Probably because if they're not immune to it, they die. SCP-061. SCP-061. SCP-061 is an acoustical computer program being developed by SCP researchers with the intent of producing successful countermeasures to similar programs being developed by governments and individuals around the world. Inspired by research on data expunge, SCP Command saw both the potential and harm in the ability to control the brain functions of other human beings. Laymen understand that music can elicit certain emotions and memories, or various sounds can elicit fear and excitement by simply being heard. Governments around the world have been attempting to expand on that premise for decades. SCP research is the first to elicit responses on higher mental activities. Not really. This has actually been around for a long time. It's not even that difficult to do, but we have more. Parts of the brain affected by SCP-061 differ from those stimulated by or data expunged or by subliminal messaging. Instead of acting on parts of the brain that are thought to be in control of the subconscious, acoustical frequencies produced by the program intercept conscious thoughts as they are produced and replace them. Kind of like psychic driving or other techniques, which is simply basically putting a microwave sound inside of the human head, which is different than the high-frequency sound voice from earlier, that generally takes something that is very close to you or in contact with the skin to transfer the sound that then is perceived as coming from inside your head. Microwave sound can be produced at a distance, sometimes up to 50 to 100 meters away. It can be focused on you, and you will hear usually kind of a metallic-sounding voice inside your head telling you what to do. Psychic driving is simply when you produce the same message over and over again until a person can only think of the same thing. For instance, kill your neighbor, kill your neighbor, kill your neighbor, kill your neighbor. Constantly until the job is done. Let's see, baseline rhythm convinces the rest of the brain that the conscious mind is asleep. Okay, that's simply using something like isochronic tones or possibly binaural response patterns in order to entrain the brain into a specific pattern. This is, again, known, easily replicated technology. But in real life, I mean, I understand, again, this is a story that I'm talking about, and it probably sounds like I'm just getting all picky with it. Like, oh, they don't know the secret information that I have. Thanks, you. But you can look all of this up online. This is not hidden information. So, yeah, basically, somebody who was really good at it could use this to try and control your mind. Because the codes developed by SCP-061 are interpreted by motor centers in the brain as conscious instructions, and the subject typically acts accordingly. Subjects will normally have a blank facial expression while under the influence of this. They are not responsive to attempts at conversation and have no desires such as hunger or interest in sexual advances, though all commands are followed without question. The effects of the auditory control cease once the subject is no longer able to hear the program. Most test subjects report being unable to remember the actions they performed well under control, but a few have experienced the effect of watching helplessly as their bodies act against their will. This sounds really similar to the effects of scopolamine on a person, where for up to 16 hours people will do exactly what you tell them and even act normally, but not often they won't even remember what they did and have no particular ability to resist you. In South America, this is often referred to as a zombie drug, and it's used to rob people, so it's kind of interesting. Now, this is an auditory mind control method of doing something very similar. They seem to have a little more information, but it's all pretty basic looking. I've certainly encountered things in real life that are far more advanced, but again, this would be a good thing to study up on, both in the real world and in the fictional. Let's move on now. Description. SCP-070 appears to be a human male of Native American descent, with a normal appearance save for a pair of rusty metal wings emerging from his back. Each wing is composed of several flat iron bars, about 6 centimeters wide and connected end-to-end, with rotating rivets to form an articulated length of metal over 2 meters long. Hanging from these bars are chains various lengths, 22 on each wing, each tipped with a barbed arrowhead. The subject seems to have no other anomalous properties besides these wings. They appear to act independently of the person they are attached to, and the subject has stated repeatedly that it has no control over them. However, when damage has been done to the wings, the subject has shown signs of physiological distress, including sweating, reduced blood flow to the face, and screaming in pain. The wings have been observed to fold and expand, shoot out, and whip as chains at high speed, both individually and collectively. and anchors arrowheads in concrete, wood, and like materials. The subject has not displayed any overt hostility to personnel. It will often react violently to perceived threats by lashing its chains out at assailants and wrapping its chains around its body in a defensive posture. The most effective means of subdual has proven to be sticky foam, non-lethal weaponry, which can reliably ensnare the subject's chains from a safe distance. Yeah, well, the interest here is the apparently primitive metal, almost seeming to come to life, attached to a human body. Now, this one isn't that common now, but if you look at the historical records, there was a time within the last few hundred years where people would show up with moving parts that appeared to be attached to their bodies, growing out of their bodies nearly, or surgically put into the bodies, that worked on their own without seeming sensible. Having not been able to really look at it, I can't tell you why that happens, but it's certainly a form of technology that we've either lost or is not necessarily from this reality scheme. So I'm going to leave that one there, but again, something to pay attention to. Okay, SCP-080. It's unknown if SCP-080 has a physical mass or body, as all attempts to interact with it have physically failed and have been met with adverse effects. Researchers and personnel have described seeing the subject as various shadows and humanoid effigies, with the only common attribute being two smoky eyes. It has come to the attention of researchers that the subject induces uncontrollable drowsiness upon anyone entering its chamber. After approximately 30 minutes, any person observing it will be forced into REM sleep and may suffer irreversible psychological damage. This effect occurs even if SCP-080 is being observed from a separate room. If at any time the subject finds a way to hide itself, such as in a cupboard, under a bed, covered in a sheet, etc., it will disappear entirely. Additionally, if any light enters the containment room with a greater luminescence than that produced by a standard child's nightlight, SCP-080 will instantly vanish. Both of these events are considered a containment breach, and any personnel responsible will be severely reprimanded and possibly reassigned. For all inquiries regarding the origin of the subject and its procurement by the Foundation, please see attached. Redacted. Because, well, that actually is exactly the way things get done half the time. Please see attached. Redacted. Ew. And I have a decently high clearance. Well, I had a decently high clearance. But, yeah, that is definitely far better than taking out the dates here. Not giving you all the information is just the government and extra-governmental way. Okay, what we're looking at here is basically something that forces a specific mental state. In this case, dreaming. It forces you into REM sleep, and you may suffer irreversible psychological damage from the effect occurring. That is, well, you've probably sometime in your life run into something that's actually done something kind of similar to that to you. I can't go into it, but that one's not even that weird. It's usually pretty harmless, though. Sometimes people experience nightmares over it. You'll live. SCP-081. SCP-081 is a contagious virus that appears to be a mutated version of the redacted virus. Okay. But with blank segments in its RNA instead of blank. Because by hearing that it's 3 segments instead of 4 or something like that, we're going to be able to master genetics and remake the virus. Okay? The virus is human-specific, but is spread by rats who act as passive carriers. SCP-081 can also be spread through sexual intercourse and exposure to infected blood. SCP-081 infects adipocytes and leukocytes, inducing both to absorb nutrients at a vastly accelerated rate. As the nutrients are absorbed, infected B cells produce and secrete large quantities of modified human antibody, Adipocytes expand and proliferate, and the organism's caloric intake increases. When concentration of adipose tissue reaches a critical point, the viral antibodies instigate systemic cell lysis? Lysis? Okay, this is a new word. It's Lysis. I need to look up the pronunciation. Followed by an unknown process leading to spontaneous combustion of the infected individual. So basically, it causes your fat to catch on fire. There is a 1-week incubation period before initial symptoms begin to occur. The duration of the symptoms depends entirely on body fat percentage of the infected. Infection proceeds through 4 distinct stages. Stage 1, during the first week, no major symptoms, though the subjects may report being slightly tired. Stage 2, in the second week of infection, the subjects begin to experience hot flashes and an increased appetite. In stage 3, subjects demonstrate extreme polyphagia. They will do anything in their power to obtain food or anything edible. During this stage, metabolism slows down significantly and weight gain proceeds rapidly. There's no set time that will elapse before the fourth and final stage. In order for the virus to complete its life cycle, the viscera must now be composed of 55% body fat, or I presume more. Once the subject reaches 55% body fat, the urge to eat will stop. Those subjects report increased instances of hot flashes. Soon afterwards, the body will go through extremely violent version of widespread cell. Soon after, the body will go through an extremely violent version of widespread. I'm getting tired. Sorry, people. Widespread cell lysis. As cells burst and the modified antibodies catalyze the ignition of fatty compounds through unknown means. The body is incinerated from the inside out via the wick effect, with additional fat serving as a fuel source. Because stage 4 is largely asymptomatic, subjects are never aware when combustion will occur, and the exact timing is apparently random. Well, we certainly have seen spontaneous human combustion events. Why it happens, we do not know. The wick effect is largely thought to be part of this. The idea that you could have a virus creating conditions which cause a chemical inside of the human body to become hot enough to start this happening internally is not at all impossible. At first it would seem that way because we don't burst in the flame very often. We're mainly made of water, but we're also chemical production factories. And the idea that we have things in our body that could be separated, altered, recombined in such ways as to produce a very, very high temperature is not at all impossible. Let's see, and there's more, and it goes on, it looks like about some things that have some actual research behind them in real life. Here, Addendum 081-3. Due to the United States' current obesity epidemic, it is crucial that wild SCP-081 be eradicated. Yes, it is. Not, again, that I'm saying that this is real. This is a story, if one that looks slightly better researched than a lot of them. But, I've actually researched spontaneous human combustion. Everything that I found in my research on it that I can prove is contained in this story. I just flat out will tell you that. What actually causes it to happen, I do not specifically know, but it can happen, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that part of the time when houses burn down and they don't know why, it's something like this. Okay, next up we have SCP-093. Now this one, just pay attention. It's going to sound weird. Basically, SCP-093 is primarily a red disc carved from stone. It's got some circular engravings on it. That's not important. The object itself isn't that important, because again, it's a fictional object. When held in a hand, The object will change hue when held by a living individual. The colors taken on are still being researched to establish a link. Current belief holds that the changes depend on regrets carried by the holder. Sometimes weird technologies from other places have weird multiple abilities contained in them. It is really, really strange that you're going to find like a magic toaster that does something weird, but a weird looking object, a disc, a ball, a pyramid, engraved, not engraved, made of strange metals, tools that looked almost like they were grown with engravings in them from hundreds of thousands of years ago. These things show up from time to time, and sometimes they've got weird abilities. And that's the part of this that is really important. If SCP-093 is removed from a mirror and not held by a person, it will seek out the nearest mirror-like surface. This is mainly to the story given here, and again, I don't have one exactly like this. Basically, the point here is that the object, when carried by a human, allows for human beings to functionally pass through a mirror to another reality scheme. We don't hold the mirrors or portals to other worlds anymore. This used to be a very common thought. Mirrors were scarcer, they showed good reflections, it looks like there's depth to it, so of course you can pass through to this other world. Kind of makes sense in a kind of primitive way, but this does not mean that other cultures in other realities don't hold to things like that, and don't design their technologies, or indeed technologies designed here a long time ago, in such ways to allow that to happen. Now, I don't think it's a property of the mirror itself, but it doesn't mean that the mirror wouldn't be a key for that, and indeed, I have heard some stuff about mirrors. I've heard some things about mirrors that kind of make this one seem way more plausible than it really probably should for just being a story on the SCP Foundation's website for their fictional stories. Okay, I'm gonna hit this one. SCP-096, the Shy Guy. Okay, now this one sounds a little bit like a joke, but weird things like this happen. They exist. This subject is a humanoid creature measuring approximately 2.38 meters in height, so tall. Subject shows very little muscle mass, with a preliminary analysis of body mass suggesting mild malnutrition. Arms are grossly out of proportion with the rest of the subject's body, with an approximate length of 1.5 meters each. Skin is mostly devoid of pigmentation, with no signs of any body hair. Subject's jaw can open to 4 times the norm of an average human. Other facial features remain similar to an average human, with the exception of the eyes, which are also devoid of pigmentation. It is not yet known whether the subject is blind or not. It shows no signs of any higher brain functions, and is not considered to be sapient. SCP-096 is normally extremely docile, with pressure sensors inside the cell indicating it spends most of the day pacing by the eastern wall. However, when someone views the subject's face, whether it be directly via video recording or even a photograph, it will enter a stage of considerable emotional distress. SCP-096 will cover its face with its hands and begin screaming, crying, and babbling incoherently. Approximately 1 to 2 minutes after the first viewing, the subject will begin running to the person who viewed its face, who from this point out will be referred to as SCP-096-1. Documented speeds have varied from 35 to blank kilometers per hour. Nobody would give us a blank kilometers per hour there after saying 35. Sorry. I'm being nitpicky with the story again. And seems to depend on the distance from SCP-0961. At this point, no material or method can impede the subject's progress. The actual position of the secondary subject does not seem to affect the primary subject's response. It seems to have an innate sense of the location of the secondary subject. This reaction does not occur when viewing artistic depictions, so good to know, we can have a drawing of it. When arriving at the secondary location, the primary will proceed to kill and data expunge the secondary subject. 100% of cases have left no traces of SCP-0961. SCP-096 will then sit down for several minutes before regaining its composure and becoming docile once again. It will then attempt to make its way back to its natural habitat of data redacted. Now that I will grant you a data redacted on. That one makes total sense. The last thing you want when dealing with an entity that could become hostile by simply viewing it is for people to go looking for it. Now, would people do that? Yes, because many people are morons, particularly people who think this stuff is all fake. Now, again, this is false. I mean, I have never dealt with or directly heard about anything exactly like this. But I've heard of some things that you would definitely categorize in this general area. And since I've worked on some of them, I've signed non-disclosure agreements, and I can't speak about them without really being in legal trouble. Okay, so I'm probably just gonna die anyway. But I mean, come on, guys. If I can milk this out for just a little bit longer, maybe I can make a difference. Probably not. Okay, let's get back here. And I'm going to say that is all I'm doing today. I'm going to save these up and try to produce them, if not all at once, then at least in a big bulk to begin with for people to listen to, so that if they get me, there'll be something out there. Just honestly, copy these, put the links out, whatever it is you've got to do. Even if you think I'm full of BS, do me a solid and put that out there. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just some guy talking about some stories online other people have written. The worst it's going to do is give some clicks to this SCP Foundation page, and they totally deserve it. These people have done some great work. They've had some good stories. So if nothing else, you're giving them a hand. So thanks for that. I'll try and get to the next of these as soon as possible. Hopefully I can do these up in a few days, and then I'll try and maybe circle back around and do more on things, or if questions come in and I have time. Thank you all. I appreciate this so much.